It's time for Swatchamania 3, the Snoopy Moonphase edition. We are Baltic, and I don't mean the weather in Scotland this time, plus news from Only Watch, and a bit of British watchmaker fisticuffs get settled before the first bell rings. All this and more on today's show. Welcome to Scottish Watches podcast. We are doing a couple of shows ahead of Watches and Wonders. Already there is a deluge of information, lots of emails, lots of PDFs dropping into our inboxes. There's been a few things leaked. There already are a few predictions rolling around the ether, but we're going to try and cover as many new timepieces, as much news as possible, and give you an update on a few things that have been happening in the world of watches. And there's a good time to tell you to check the show notes. A link will be in the description. That'll take you to our website where you'll find all the text spec, the details, the links, and all the pictures that are associated with this episode of the show. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you are only getting half the story. We do 2 shows a week. One usually ends up in video format. The other just stays on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. So if you want to hear the interview shows ahead, and I mean months ahead of the time they appear on YouTube, then be sure to check our website because there's tons of cool things and we'll recap those at the end of this show. Now it's probably time to talk to Dave, because Dave is the man with the plan when it comes to Swatch, when it comes to all things Mooney, and all things Omega. So it is a triple bill, it's a hat trick of things happening this week. Almost as predicted, to try and gazump the folks at Watches and Wonders, Swatch Group have announced something to do with Snoopy, something to do with the moon, and something to do with being plastic fantastic.
Slightly not surprisingly, seeing as they started to tease this many months ago when pictures of Snoopy started to appear on the Swatch websites and Swatch Instagram accounts. It was probably a matter of time before the inevitable happened. Yes, a Snoopy Speedmaster, come Omega, come Swatch, whatever they're going to call it this time. But yes, it has finally made it out into the wild. It was released a mere couple of days before you're listening to this onto the Instagrams, albeit with a launch date of the 26th of March, when it will be available only in stores, not online, and will be available in a variety of stores around the country. That said, not all of them, and also internationally, of course. But do check the Swatch website to make sure you're not making a journey to a store that doesn't range them. But what are we talking about? Of course, it is the next iteration of the Moonswatch All White. They've taken the most sought after Speedmaster, that being the current Snoopy, the one that isn't limited edition but may as well be limited edition because you can't basically get one unless you're willing to wait a long time, and even then you still might not get one. But that said, they've now brought it out in the Plastic Fantastic Swatch version, and I think personally it looks really good. It's all white. It might even satisfy Ricky for that all white watch that he's been looking for.
Hey, I said ceramic, not bioceramic / plastic.
Plastic. We'll go with plastic because I think that's probably broadly accurate. As to whether that white watch remains white, that is something we will need to wait and see.
It's not the watch, it's the strap-on the watch that's going to be soiled and stained and end up dirty brown.
And there's nothing worse than a soiled strap-on.
Get the TCP and the Dettol out.
Time will tell. What have they done though? They've effectively taken one of the sub-registers and they've integrated a little Moonphase. You've got the little circumference that goes round from 1 to 29.5. As many people who are into their Moonphases know, the moon cycle is around 29.5 days. It has little Snoopy sitting there. You've got Snoopy also on the battery, the pop-off battery cover, and if you look on the moon, there's a little Snoopy footprint on there as well. They've done this pretty well. It is pretty much all white, albeit with black hands, which do help to make the watch very legible and readable. Aside from that, 250 of your British pounds, around 310 of your US dollars will get you one of these. They are not limited edition. They're being added to the core range. It's not like the Moonshine Gold versions, which were generally available in limited outlets for one day only, and when they were gone, they were gone. This one is being added to the core range. And a little birdie tells me that this might not be the only one. If people were to look at some of the cartoons and images that have been doing the rounds from Swatch themselves and look at a cake and look at the candles on the cake, this might give a clue as to what also might be coming down the line as well. So the queues on the 26th will be insane. The resale prices will be madness, but give it a little bit of time, and like most of the other Moonswatches, you will be able to get your hand on one. The question, Ricky, is how many folk are going to be wearing this at Watches and Wonders?
Quite a lot, I would assume. It is almost like the bragging rights, and when the first one came out, there was only a handful of folks had it. Not everybody really cared last time. We saw how bad the queues were, not very. We saw how quickly people got hold of these, and we saw how quickly they returned to RRP or below on eBay with all the scalpers that didn't quite make the cash they thought they would. But what day is this one getting released and what time?
My understanding, as I think I've already said, I may be forgotten though, it was the 26th of March.
I'm going to give you an English lesson on the difference between a date and a day.
That's a very pertinent point, but most people also understand the concept of how to use a calendar.
Dave, what's the point in us doing a show? We could just tell people to f***ing Google it all.
We could, and maybe that's what they do, because they probably do fact check us. But hey, we'll leave it there. Tuesday the 26th of March is when this watch hits the stores.
Well done, Dave. Congratulations. Gold star for you.
So outside of that though, it is as the stores open. I'm sure stores will open at varying times around the world, but there is no specific time that I have seen mentioned. The key thing is though, don't fall for the scammer hype in terms of the markups for resellers, because this is not, repeat, not limited edition. It might involve a little bit of a wait, but don't fall for it, because the less people that fall for it, the less attractive it becomes for them to do this, and the sooner we can all get one. So outside of that, should we move on?
Moving on to something that is not super cool, and this is one of these news stories that I didn't really know about beforehand, but it's a kind of a tale of, I suppose, be careful what you do. Be careful with loads of things on planet Earth, including consignment watches. But this is a story that comes from the land of the rising sun. Nothing to do with Grand Seiko, nothing to do with G-Shock or Casio or Citizen Group. This is something a little bit left of centre, and it exploded in everybody's face.
So this is a Japanese peer-to-peer watch rental company, and many of you might think, what actually is that?
From the land of vending machines where you could buy used panties.
And that is merely the beginning of what you can buy in some Japanese vending machines. If you think you can if you think about it, you can probably get it. Anyway, peer-to-peer. What are we talking about here? You may remember it from the LimeWire days, as you, let's say, shared files to get some maybe music or videos. Also, Airbnb ultimately is a peer-to-peer system, and there are many peer-to-peer car clubs. Effectively, people can submit their watches to this business based in Japan, and they can earn a fee or a rental from that watch being lent out to individuals for a weekend, for a wedding, for a week, for a special business meeting, whatever it may be. And it seemed to have been going okay. People had submitted watches. When they first launched, they had a pool, I believe, of around 100 watches. That very rapidly expanded within the first 6 to 9 months of their operation to well over 1,000 watches of all sorts, shapes, colours, sizes and materials and brands. But it's all gone wrong. Suddenly, come January of this year, the monies that were being paid to the poor people who owned these watches stopped coming in. And the man with the plan vanished into thin air, and the watches did so as well. Some have appeared on Chrono24, some have appeared on various reselling sites, and also in various Japanese pre-owned watch salons and boutiques as well. And right before this happened, the person involved, jumped on a plane to the United Arab Emirates, and it's believed he's in Dubai at this point in time. The Japanese police have issued arrest warrants for this individual, but I don't think he's going to be facing justice anytime soon. So, like many of these things go, it is very much down to the owner beware what you do with your watch, because all too easily this watch could vanish. Many stories have popped up in the past with watches being left with pre-owned dealers who take watches in consignment, and maybe they also do a bit of a vanishing act. This one seemed a bit more legitimate in that it had been running for a good few years. It looks like it's hit the wall and the individual has vanished off the face of the earth. Would you ever lend any of your lovely timepieces out in a programme like this, Ricky?
I lent out my Mad One Red to somebody that co-hosts this show with me, and that was a tricky one. I get frog marched down to the secure vaults in Glasgow city centre one cold afternoon, and he stood outside as I went down. Iris scanned, PIN code scanned, card scanned, the watch, gave it to him. It all worked out in the end. I got it back. It seemed to be fine. Although somebody may have disassembled it, I'm not sure, and put it back together. Really not sure. But anyway, this all sounds a little bit dodgy, and I would not give anybody my watches on consignment. Wouldn't give cars either. I mean, I've seen these, you've got a nice car, you can hire it out, people use it, bring it back. They are going to rag the shit out of it. And nobody takes care of stuff like you do of your own. So yeah, it just sounds like FTX for watches. Bit of a Ponzi scheme, and it was always going to go pop.
For me, certainly not anything I would ever be interested in. As you say, you're never quite sure what that watch gets up to, where they wear it.
It could be Christopher Walken. It could end up in a very dark place for a long time.
Fists and wrists fit in interesting places, and if it was to go with your diving watch, I don't know if I'd want it back.
No, wouldn't want that back. But something that has come back is a story about Only Watch. You'll remember the hullabaloo last year where Only Watch was postponed, air quotes, which means cancelled unless there is a further date given. A further date has not been given, but World Tempest magazine and their online platform, they seem to be the only people that I have spotted this, where one of the journalists there has interviewed Luke from Only Watch. And in the preceding few months, the accounts have been gone through by an independent third party, and allegedly, everything seems to look okay. So a lot of information on the website and in this magazine says, hey, look, everything is cool. And I thought, right, okay, that's one of the charges. That's like an alleged felon has 5 charges against them and are cleared of 1. What about the other 4? So we still don't really have much information on who's behind the companies, who is going to benefit from the patent technology if that turns into a product in the future, and where the monies have kind of gone so far. Am I missing anything here?
I don't think so. I think it's fair to say that they have appeared to have successfully taken on an auditor. I believe he works for a firm, Grant Thornton, who has gone through everything and has put together the required legal necessities for the books. Whether that is fully open yet remains to be seen, because nobody, I believe, has actually seen these audited accounts yet. But once they come out, I am sure they will be picked over very carefully by many individuals to see to what extent and to what level of detail is actually given. Is it the bare minimum that's required by law, or is it very much an open book? Let's tell everybody as much as we can to try and make this whole saga go away. I have my doubts that it will be as open as many would like it to be. I think it may resort to being the bare minimum that legally has to be done. You mentioned also about many other things in terms of context with what happens with the patents, what happens with the research. There has been some comments made by Tess, the daughter of Luke, who seems to work more in the kind of research side of this operation, saying that they are moving forward and there are some first-in-human trials going on. She also rationalises to answer the question of why is there 50 plus million still in the bank? She gives an answer that has some weight and credibility. Is it the full story? Again, who knows? But yes, I'm sure there's many nooks, crannies and turns still to come in this saga. What it does appear, though, is that a couple of their partners, that being Palexpo, who actually host the auction, and Christie's, who perform the auction, have committed to work with them to bring a spring date for this to rehappen in 2024. I believe in May, June time, so not really that far away. Letters, by all accounts, have been sent out to all of the participating brands. My feeling is what will make or break this is whether the brands want to have anything to do with it anymore. I'm sure a few, and I'm sure many people listening to this could guess who those brands will be. Will probably commit to it, the ones who maybe took a long time to uncommit the last time. I'm sure a few of the key brands and probably some of the big names might just decide to keep themselves away from it because, where there's smoke is there fire. Maybe I'm being unfair, but I think with the conservative nature of the Swiss watch industry, many of the brands will think, thanks, but we'll just leave it just now. Or maybe they'll take a seat back to see what actually becomes of this year's auction, if, in fact, it does go ahead. In many respects, I'd like to see it go ahead. It is a good cause. I'd like to think that everything is legitimate and above board, and I would like to see it come back from potentially having hit the wall. But let's wait and see once all of the paperwork and papers are published.
In agreement. I would really like everything to be cool. and everything to come out in the wash, that it's fine, and there was some oversights as in things hadn't been properly documented, properly released to the public, and once all the different things have been gone through, it all works out, it all clears and it all checks. And now's the time I should probably ask Dave for a bit of an update on what's been happening at work, because we've not really had a little check-in for a while about Raj, but there's been a few things popping up. I spotted some moves and shakes when it came to Chinese New Year. There was a release there. I spotted a new variation of a watch that came out a long time ago with the new movement inside it. And I believe that Chasing Microns, the kind of mini documentary short film that we got a press preview of last year over in Spain, that was then released to everybody, it might be up for some awards. So Dave, give us the Raj update.
So the update, taking off his podcast hat and taking on his Raj hat, is Project Independence or Mission Independence, something that you, Ricky, were aware of when we did the press camp last year. It was a kind of project idea that was to talk about Raj's track record and journey about trying to remain as an independent business, doing things on its own in terms of movements, engineering, and all of those other wonderful things. And we launched the new movement project, that being the Micro Rotor Tourbillon, taking the technology from the K2 Micro Rotor and from the Handwind Tourbillon that you know so well in your Tourbillon 1 watch, pushing them together to come up with an all-new Micro Rotor Tourbillon movement. That was going to be featured in a watch known as the Autark Tourbillon. The Autark is a name that harks back to a model that was first used with the K1, the first movement that Raj did. Autark meaning independence in German. So for this watch, we reuse the name. We take the design concept of the Autark, but it's an all-new case. Still grade 5 titanium as the previous one was, but using an all-new case construction and specially designed to fit this new movement. The Autark Tourbillon is going to obviously feature the Micro Rotor Tourbillon movement, but coming in at a mere 8.8 millimeters thick, with using the bracelet and the technology that came from the Superseed, again, albeit in a grade 5 titanium version, but with the micro adjust clasp. This is something that people have followed the development journey, having gone from a concept and idea to drawings, to actually prototype running movements, to prototype cases, and the next step on this is people will get to see the initial sample dials as well, so everything coming together on that front. But it was realised by the engineers that the K2 movement would indeed fit into this new case as well. So we thought, why don't we do this? We do an Autark small seconds. So this is the first time this small seconds complication has been used with the Micro Rotor K2 movement. And it's a simpler affair compared to the Tourbillon, but the advantage of that is it comes in at an altogether more attainable price. Obviously the Micro Rotor Tourbillon, in classic Raj fashion, is significantly less expensive than its peers within the industry. That said, it is significantly over 10,000, which still makes it an expensive watch by anyone's means, albeit very accessible for a tourbillon. But the K2 variant is going to come in at under 5,000 Swiss francs. You're right, Ricky, we did a Chinese New Year edition version with a red dial, kind of a very popular colourway that's used traditionally in a lot of Chinese New Year watches, as has been seen by many other brands out there that we've covered over the years. But what did we do special? A little engraving of a kind of traditional dragon, because it's a year of the wood dragon, on the Micro Rotor itself. And then we followed that up a few weeks later with two standard edition dials, a salmon fume variant and a grey fume variant as well. Both of those available on pre-order now as we speak, with delivery in the summertime, in and around July, August, so not too long a wait for that as well. So that broadly summarises what we've been up to and where we're at now.
Well, Dave, you forgot about the movie, the good thing, the good part of the press trip.
Actually, the film crew that made it asked us if they would be happy for them to submit it to a couple of different film festivals, and as many people know, there are lots of local and national film festivals doing the tour around the globe. They entered it, I believe, in 3 or 4 different competitions, and most of them have still to kind of leaked down to the final lists, but the first one came through, and we were delighted to see that for the Brand Film Awards, which are based in London, they take submissions from companies that make films generally either about a product or about the company themselves. So they take submissions from the likes of British Airways or Sony or Marriott Hotels or any of these brands, many of which you will know and love. many of which you may not have heard of as well. But they asked and they submitted it to this, and we have been leaded into the final, I believe, category that has 4 other submissions in it. And come the next few weeks, there will be the award ceremony in London, and we get to find out whether we win our category. So looking forward to that. It was just really nice to be kind of selected and get some recognition. But to be fair, even outside of the content, the professionals that put this film together, they have an amazing track record. They are consummate professionals, and it was great fun working with them. Really, to be honest, seeing how an entirely different industry actually works behind the scenes. And those boys really do work hard, whether they're doing makeup, lighting, camera work, all of these other weird and wonderful titles that you often see on the scrolling pitch of names at the end of any production.
Were you excited to find out who the best boy was?
You'll laugh at that, but it has to be said, that was one of the questions we were asking them. As we found out, one of the guys on set was the best boy. It's one of those titles, a little bit like maybe something that happens at a big watch show that's called Touch and Feel, that maybe didn't translate from another language so well, but yeah, we'll go with that.
This is the episode where there's lots of news snippets of things that kind of went bump in the night. And after Watchmakers Day, there was a little kerfuffle, a little bit of fisticuffs between a couple of brands, and it's all resolved and it's all sorted out. But because the interview show that we put out was recorded the day before Watchmakers Day, then we edited it up, the audio podcast went out, the YouTube video followed suit a week later. Then we get some comments because things had kicked off in our YouTube comments and people were giving us a hard time because of something we recorded before it kicked off. So it doesn't make sense. But anyway, Watch Pro picked up on this story and basically Jose Isotope was not entirely happy that, let's just say that after a couple hundred years of watch development, that he released a watch to do with a fire exit sign, and then a year later another company released a watch to do with a fire exit sign with the same symbol on the dial. Completely stark contrast looking watches, but one was called the exit watch and one was called the fire exit watch. Again, from 2 companies, a couple hundred miles away, in the same country, within a year, nothing having happened for a couple hundred years. Coinkydink, perhaps, but it caused a bit of a stramash. Ended up in Watch Pro. Watch Pro's Rob Corder got in touch with both Jose and Johnny Garrett from Williamwood, had a chat between the two, and within a day it seemed to be resolved, which is great. So a big crazy Instagram post from Isotope got removed, and everybody is singing Kumbaya, which is fantastic. This is all sorted, but the reason we bring it up is because we will get shit from people if we don't. We will be seen to be burying the news because 2 of our friends were having a playground squabble. So we wanted to report on it. Yes, it's appeared in Watch Pro twice. It's appeared online, it's appeared on Instagram, and it's appeared in our YouTube comments. So we wanted to cover it and say it's been put to bed. There have been a shaking of hands, and all is good, so we can move on from there. And we'll probably move on to a brand that we've not really chatted about much, but they are hitting the headlines. They are a collector favourite, and they put out watches that have got really funky, cool movements at an inexpensive price point, and I got hands-on with a couple of their models at a recent Red Bar event we'll talk about shortly. But this is from Baltic, a brand you've heard of, you've seen, they've been on our Instagram, they've been on our website, and hopefully at some point we can actually get them on the show. So do you want to tell us about their new release?
Pretty recent brand, only kicked off in 2017, so not been around for a huge length of time, not with that depth of kind of history that many of the brands that you know and love have. That said, they've very much been taking design cues from watches from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, those classic watches from, I guess, the post-field watch war era into the kind of moving towards that slightly more design-led aesthetic. Now, they've been very good at doing this, and they've managed to come up with quite a lot of designs that you can see the design language carry through them, but they've all been quite different. This one, to give its model the full name, is the Baltic Hermetic Glacier Limited Edition with ice-inspired dials. Now, there are 2 versions of this, a white one and a black one. Little bit of a reminder of what you might expect from someone like Grand Seiko, or maybe someone like Anordain in Glasgow. That said, a much simpler dial, not Grandfu enamel, none of the kind of high complication manufacturing that Grand Seiko are famous for, but it definitely has that aesthetic at an altogether more affordable price. What are we talking about here? You've got these little applique dots that mark out the 12, 3, 6 and 9 o'clock on there. Then you've got this really good looking kind of metallic ring just under them, and then the feature, the centre point of everything, is the centre area of the dial, where you have a pressed or embossed pattern, and it's either in white or black, obviously taking ice and glaciers as their inspiration, as the name may well suggest. Everything else about this watch, pretty much what you're going to expect to get from Baltic. So in terms of case, you have a 316L stainless steel case, pretty similar to the Hermetic Tourer series, in fact identical to those as well. You've got the pull-out crown on there, you've got the solid case back, you've got the sapphire glass, 150 metres of water resistance on there as well, 37 millimetres in diameter, very wearable, popular size, under 11 millimetres in thickness, in fact 10.8 to be precise, and that includes the domed sapphire on there as well. Lug to lug, 46 millimetres, so super wearable. Miyota caliber 9039 in there, 42 hours of power reserve, and you also have a stop second feature on there. In terms of how you wear it, you can either choose between these FKM vulcanized rubber tropic style straps, or you can have a metal bracelet, either in beads of rice or flat link style. Every watch also ships with a relatively neutral black NATO strap as well. And how much do they want for this, you may ask? €600 if you have it on a rubber strap, and €665 if you have it on the bracelet. That said, both prices are exclusive of tax.
To me, in my head, they're almost like a version of Ming, but still economically priced. You get great design, you get fantastic build quality, and you get such a dedicated fan base where the collectors are absolutely jumping and chapping at the bit to get the latest releases, and it isn't derivative of stuff that's out just now. So the guys are doing amazingly well, and I have got the guy's email address. I will be dropping him an email once this episode launches, and we'll see what we can do. We'll see if we can get our heads together, because they're doing amazingly good stuff, and it's a consistency thing. It's not just they did one great release and then the next one's lukewarm, etc., etc. They are consistently great. So, moving on from there to something else. There seems to be a bit of a thing in the ether where somebody does something with an auction house, releases a whole load of watches from a collection, it does well, and it has a knock-on effect that somebody else goes, oh, that worked, let me try that. So we had the guy a while back, I think it was the Oak collection. Do you remember this one, Dave? I think you actually went down to have a look at this down south. The gentleman decided to show off his watch collection, and people went, oh, that's nice. And I thought, ulterior motive, why? Then a year later, oh, look, they're all up for sale. How rare. And look at all these articles and look at all these videos that people made a year ago for free to promote all these watches. Look, auction. And then, what's that guy, Reginald somebody? He decided, Elton John, sorry. Elton John decided that he was going to take his watch collection and pop it online as well. And then, funnily enough, that did great. And what's the latest thing? What's the latest thing, Dave? Who's the latest person?
Well, this one is interesting, and I'm not going to say controversial, but let's just say the individual concerned maybe isn't specifically giving consent. Michael Schumacher's collection, not sure if it's his whole collection, but certainly some key pieces of it are up for auction. Notable pieces being an AP Royal Oak, an FP Journe Vagabond, and they are coming up for auction at Christie's. These are unique watches as well, so these are piece uniques made specifically for the Formula One champion, and a lot of watches seem to have done back and forth between previous manager of the team, Jean Todt, and Michael Schumacher, in that 5-year glory window where Michael seemed to win pretty much everything along with Ferrari, and obviously team principal being Jean Todt at that time. Some of his watches did come up for auction over the last couple of years, and they raised some fairly punchy money as well. But actually now we have some of Michael's own watches coming up. This auction is going to be May 13th, 2024 in Geneva, as mentioned, with Christie's. The value that they're expecting this Vagabond one to get is between 1 and 2 million Swiss francs, which, it has to be said, is quite a lot of money. You also have, obviously, this Royal Oak chronograph in there as well. Be interesting to see where they go. Find it a little bit weird that somebody who I don't think anybody really knows his current state of affairs, but let's just say that they are not generally pretty well, how these watches are coming up for auction, but they are coming up for auction nonetheless. So let's see what they get at the auction time.
Moving on from that, we should probably talk about what we have been up to, and I have mentioned it a couple of times. There was a Red Bar event in Glasgow, and it wasn't a collaborative event where maybe there was a showcase from a brand or there was some new releases or some specials coming out. This was a grassroots event, and it was good to see some old familiar faces in a different setting. Yes, they came across to Edinburgh Castle last year for Global Red Bar, but this was the one where we all dragged our watch collections along to Glasgow on a really terrible night. Really, really shit weather. But it's Glasgow, it's Scotland, it's Baltic. Ta-da! And we actually got to see a nice Baltic watch. And what I did was I grabbed the review watches with permission from the brands and took them along with me. So 12 timepieces, not my own ones, but brands' own pieces, came along with me in a display case, and I got to find out what people generally thought of them. And it was none of the usual, oh, I like that because it's yours. Because these were not ours, they were up for review. We got the honest to goodness truth from the collectors, from the buyers, from the public. And it was interesting to see what people thought. We had the Erebus watch from Jodie, which I have not had a chance to even talk about on the show. I think I wore it once in a brief shot, and that was it, because I've not even resized the thing. It arrived just before Watchmakers Day. We had the Nubeo Sky Lab, I think it's called, the one that's kind of the satellite wandering hours. People quite like that one. They loved that new Nodus that we had on the show a week ago. Everybody fell in love with that. The Centenary from Duckworth, another firm favourite. The Whiteout from Elliot Brown. People really dug that, and the fact it's got a fully loomed dial. And we had a Brooklands, we had a Bowcroft. Yeah, just loads and loads of cool brands. Quite a lot of the British ones, a lot of the guys that were British Watchmakers Day. And to see the folks coming up, lifting it, trying it on, taking wrist shots, recording reels, popping them on their own personal Instagrams. It was great. And Simona came along and she actually brought her collection with her as well. And people had a good look through that and were commenting on this watch and that watch. There was classics watches from the 80s. There were crazy mechanical hand wind numbers from the Eastern Bloc. Tons and tons of stuff from us. Then there was all the other guys. Anne Ordain turned up. They were showcasing all their enamel dials and all kinds of stuff there, and other collectors on the day with crazy things. I think there was an Eric Clapton Swatch with an ETA movement inside that's worth thousands of pounds. There were just loads and loads of standouts, so really good to back again.
It was a great event. It was good just to have a Commoner Garden regular Red Bar event. A couple of the guys there with some real interesting watches, and in fact Simona was there with her watch collection, and very proud of it she was as well too, and so she should be. She had a pretty complete watch box, and she made sure that people had a good look at her watches, and she was also doing the round making sure she got to observe what everyone else was up to. And it's really good to see her being along with Sarah, obviously, both of them into watches. It's just nice to see we're getting a little bit of diversity in the group and not just a bunch of middle-aged white Scottish guys that it maybe was to begin with. So nice seeing that kind of age variation. We even had obviously Ted, who has been on the show before in some past episodes. He was along there as well, and many other friends. So yeah, is the venue we use ideal? No, because it's probably a bit dark and it's a little bit cramped sometimes, but we've got our own bar, we've got our own toilets, and it's as secure as it can be. So just great to see lots of diversity and different people there. It was a great event, and hopefully we will have one in the not too near future yet again.
Yeah, it was interesting having lots of strange men coming over and examining my fiance's box. But hey, it's fine. She had a muff diver in there. She appreciated that.
I mean, you know.
It was good to see Ted, it was good to see Gordy, Stuart, loads of folks, lots of listeners to the show. Even that chap that I feel terrible because we've spoken to him so many times about doing a whiskey and watches podcast. Do you know who I'm talking about? The guy I keep letting down?
Would that be Sandy?
That'd be Sandy. Sorry, Sandy. We will get it sorted. Actually, Dave, you take charge of this one. You get it sorted. I'm leaving this in your capable hands. It was great just to come along, check out some cool watches, chat to some good people, and without the hustle and bustle of a show or a massive event or travelling somewhere else. And I forgot to give a recap on my London trip. We talked about the drive down on the preceding show. We talked about Watchmakers Day. We don't need to talk about that. We don't need to beat the drum on that. Everybody loves it. But my Thursday down there was phenomenal. I did a little bit of a tour. Haven't done London before. I think I've been there once or twice in the last few years, and it's always been specifically to go to something, and then to go to the hotel, and then to the bloody airport. So I got to stretch my legs, went for a wander, and I had a few meetings to go and check out. So I caught up with the folks down at Breitling at their boutique, and they were giving me a bit of an insight into their 140th anniversary. Some of the pieces that are coming out, some of the ones that have just been announced that we don't have time to talk about in this show, but we will get to, and their plans for the future, what's happening when they're over at Watches and Wonders. They're not at the event, but they're kind of going to be doing stuff anyway, plus over the summer and into later on in the year, plus the Universal Genève angle and what's going to be happening there. I dropped into the Watches of Switzerland boutique, and I was told by the folks in there that this is the biggest boutique in Europe. So that was quite an eye-opener. Went into the IWC part, spoke to the gentleman there. Didn't get a business card because he didn't have any, but he was a very knowledgeable bloke. Showed me some of the latest watches. Yes, I had seen them before, but it was good to get a recap of them. And then I wandered up the stairs, and that's where they had the kind of independence, the kind of higher horology stuff. I was wearing my new UN Freak, the Magma edition, and they had the Freak Ops edition there. So he took that one out and said, why don't you compare the two, put them on the wrist, see what you think. Really, really cool guy. His name was Gabriel, and he was taking control of all the stuff there, talking about all the independence, Moser, and all the rest of it. And then in the corner, there were the MB&F, the Mad Gallery, the toys. They had the little frog-looking number, the driving watch that me and Dave looked at last Geneva Watch Days that we fell in love with. And again, couldn't have been nicer. And then I went down to the Burlington Arcade. Never been there in my life. Heard Dave talk about it and harp on about it a lot. Obviously, we know the Argyll Arcade in Glasgow intimately, and this was like a slightly compressed version, but elongated. So there was more things happening, but less room to manoeuvre. And when it got busy, it got very busy. Dropped in to see somebody I don't know, that I've never met, and that was Ricardo at Bell and Ross. He welcomed me with open arms. I got to see some of the latest watches, the Cyber Skull. They had the Luminous cased watch, I think it's the BR05 series, and they had all these things in carbon fibre, plus the commoner garden units that you see in the shops. So it was good to sit down with him for an hour or so, and then I just looked in the windows of all these crazy second-hand vintage dealers, watches I had never seen in my life before, dials I'd never seen in my life before. It was just a great experience, and then to walk out and head down to the Grand Seiko boutique. I visited their old one a couple of years ago, and I got to see the new one. Again, greeted with open arms by the people in there, got to see all the new Grand Seikos, the King Seikos, and the normal Seikos, all the way down to the Seiko 5 range. And they had them all displayed perfectly. People were coming in, trying them on. Exactly the kind of thing you want from a boutique. No hard sell, just great people that were very knowledgeable on their product range. But then I went into the Microsoft store. We don't have them really up in Scotland that I'm aware of, and they had some crazy tie-ins with Halo in June 2. They had these massive buggies that people were dicking about with. Then I dropped into the Omega boutique to see the new Whiteface Speedy. Dave saw it across in Switzerland. I had not seen it in real life, and it is really nice. Got to see some of the other one, the desert coloured ones that were a little bit IWC-like. Great experience in there. And then at the end of it, I ended up at the Hard Rock Cafe, waiting for my pickup from Simona. I had a couple of cocktails, and just before I get picked up, I get dragged down into their cave, down into their vault, to have a look at some crazy, expensive memorabilia, Jimi Hendrix stuff, Dire Straits stuff, lots of stuff, AC/DC, all the classics, all the things you would expect down there. There was guitars, drumsticks, kits, outfits, uniforms, you name it, it was down there. And in that game that we've not played for a very long time, I went back, not 20 years, but 30 years, over 30 years, maybe 35 years actually, to a film that I'd never seen before, Dave. Never seen it before. Do you know what we're talking about?
This comes as no surprise at all. Did it involve roundhouse kicks?
It may well have done, and lots of double denim. Yeah, the Patrick Swayze number from 1989, I believe, Roadhouse. Long story short, I decided to watch it because Amazon has been hyping up the new version of it, which I believe is out today as we record this, and I wanted to see the old one, so when I watch the new one, I can compare. And it was super camp, really, really super. There was some really dodgy one-liners in that one. But yeah, it was quite good. Quite liked it. And he's dead now.
And it is often parodied in Family Guy as well, where Peter Griffin enjoys doing a little bit of Roadhouse as well. So that always makes me laugh. I have not seen that movie in a long time, and I'm going to guess, as you mentioned, yes, maybe some stuff that you probably couldn't put on film these days.
Along the lines of, I used to guys like you in prison.
Probably not going to get past the kind of muster these days, but you know, it was a time and a place.
time and places, I caught something, I think it was in BBC. I think it actually was on the BBC, or it was on Amazon Prime again, and it was Blazing Saddles, which I've never seen, but I've heard about, and it had not been edited, and it had a big massive warning at the start, and I spat my Cocoa Pops everywhere when the first lines were uttered. So yeah, wow, okay.
Yeah, there's many movies, some from really not that long ago, that will raise the odd eyebrow, it has to be said these days.
And we're going to cause a little bit of controversy ourselves because we haven't done a wrist check and we don't have time to do a wrist check. So I'm going to quickly say I am wearing a watch that has been in my collection for over 6 months, and it is my Raymond Vale Freelancer Pop Edition, the turquoise one that I put on a turquoise aftermarket strap. Don't have to go into it in too much detail. It's titanium. It has got a really funky movement inside it. It's limited to, I think it was 400 odd pieces. I really like this one. We were going to have the guys from Raymond Vale on the show last year. We had a meeting with them at Geneva Watch Days, and then the trail went a bit quiet. But today I was speaking with Chloe at their PR agency, and things might be on the up and up. So stay tuned, perhaps, for some information from this independent brand you've seen in the high street, and you probably know Dick all about, because I know Dick all about them. So that'll be a good one if we manage to get that sorted out.
What am I quickly wearing? I am quickly wearing my Girard Perregaux Absolute Infinity, or Laureato Absolute Infinity, should I say, 44mm lump of titanium. Again, a limited edition, just like you're wearing, Ricky, of 230 pieces, with the grey Fume dial on the rubber strap, and a very good micro adjust deployant clasp on there as well. So that gets the wrist checks done and dusted. We did manage to do them, we just didn't need to talk too long about them.
There we go. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you guys again soon.